seats, we can get started. Any more plastic cups to donate? Anybody has plastic cups to donate? Oh, okay, we're going with a donation. Any money you want to donate? I'll take that. All right, so in your workbooks, we're going to page
We can use any medium, YouTube, if we want to.
And again, if you happen to be interested in having every word that goes into every blank space, I will send that to Dr. Rojas, and you can contact him, and he can give you that so that you will fill in every blank on the worksheet. So we're moving to section 11, which is apologize. Even if you are very careful, very loving, very kind, there will be times when you might say or do something that harms or hurts your spouse. And you can, if you're the one that has received that, you can be bitter, you can be angry, and you can be resentful, but that's not going to help you. So it would be good to practice apologizing. Here's an example. I'm going to show you well, I guess let me run through a couple of these. Loretta said we should make up, so I made up an apology. No, that's not what we mean. In fact, let me just get to the letter. There was a letter that a man wrote to his wife, and I want you to notice the words and the sentiment, the feelings behind it. He said, "Hi, sweetheart. I'm sorry about getting into an argument about putting up the Christmas lights. I guess that sometimes I feel like you push me too hard when you want something. I realize that I was wrong, and I am apologizing for being such a hard-headed guy. All I want is for you to be happy and be able to enjoy the holiday season. Nothing brightens the Christmas spirit like Christmas lights. I took the time to hang the lights for you today, and now I'm off to the hockey range. Again, I'm very sorry for the way I acted yesterday. I'll be home later. Love you," and then he signed his name. That's a simple letter of apology that was, I think you can tell, was heartfelt. In fact, his actions demonstrate that it was a heartfelt apology.
So, after that, after the wife read the letter and saw the results of him hanging the lights, she decided to write a letter in response. This is what she wrote. "Hi, honey. Thank you for that heartfelt apology. I don't often get an apology from you, and I truly appreciate it. I, too, felt bad about our argument, and I want to apologize. I realize that I can sometimes be a little pushy. I will try to respect your feelings from now on. Thank you for taking the time to hang the Christmas lights for me. It really means a lot. In the spirit of love and forgiveness, I washed your truck for you. And now I'm off to the mall. I love you too."
Well, again, very heartfelt apology as well.
I think that was very sweet of her.
Thoroughly clean, you can tell. So some of you have read a book by Gary Chapman called The 5 Languages of Love, right? But he also wrote a book called The 5 Languages of Apology. And basically he says, in as much as we have, or in the same way that we have a different language of love, we also have a different language of apology. And more than anything, our spouse has a different language of apology, and so it's important that we know what their language is so that when we apologize, they will understand. So the first language of apology, according to Gary Chapman, is expressing regret. That's probably the most normally used one, and that's when we say something like, I'm sorry.
If you think about it, that's the one we use with children all the time, isn't it? Say I'm sorry. So when our kids get in a squabble with each other, that's what we always say to them. Say I'm sorry. But it's so much more than that, and yet that's the only one we usually teach our children, is to say I'm sorry. Look at number 2. Accept responsibility. Because sometimes saying I'm sorry just doesn't cut it. Sometimes I need to say, I accept responsibility that and then clearly state what it is. So that it's not just saying I'm sorry, but I know that you really understood why I was hurt. I accept responsibility, and I understand that I hurt you when I did this. You know, fully accepting responsibility for it.
What I did was wrong. That's accepting responsibility. Let me just skip that one. The third language of apology is making restitution. Kind of like Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus didn't just say, Lord, forgive me for what I've done, and then continue to live his life. But he said, no, I'm going to make things right. And so, making restitution is when you say to your spouse, what can I do to make it right? What can I do to correct what I did? I was responsible for what I did. It's my fault. I accept that responsibility, but I don't want to just say, okay, I'm sorry, let go, but rather, what can I do to make it right?
And I'll give you a very practical example of this. Let's say that the husband has had a problem with pornography, and he's accessing it on the cell phone. A very practical way of this, what can I do to make it right, is, okay, I need to hold you accountable. You need to be accountable to me if you're really sorry. So, you have a phone now that only makes calls. It is not Wi-Fi enabled. You can't do it doesn't have all the bells and whistles. You can't go to Facebook. You can't go to any other website on your phone. You can't send text messages or get pornographic sexting pictures. All you can do is make calls with it. So that's one example of what can I do to make it right? You are going to now have access to all of my passwords. We're going to put a program on the computer that you can put programs that monitor the sites visited. So if any of those pornographic sites are visited, I will automatically get a text message on my phone. It will ding that site has been visited. And I know in your phone that you can't get Wi-Fi or anything. That's just a practical example of a situation with a married couple that we have encountered before, of a practical way of how do I make it right? You know, what can I do going forward?
The fourth language is a language of apology. It says is genuinely repenting. And that's when you say something like, I will try to not do it again. But Pastor, my husband's done this so many times, I don't even believe him anymore. Peter the apostle came to Jesus, actually the apostle with him, and he says, Peter says to Jesus, how many times should I forgive my brother? Up to 7 times? And I wonder if Peter was expecting Jesus to say, Peter, 7 times? I was just going to tell you 3 times, but you said 7. You're really a good apostle, a good disciple. But instead Jesus said, no, Peter, not 7 times. 70 times 7. Which is how many? 490. So when your husband has failed you 489 times, then you say, I'm going to give you one last chance. And then I don't have to stop forgiving you. Is that what Jesus meant? No, I think what Jesus meant was, why are you keeping track? Because if you forgive, is as if it hadn't happened. Let it go. Forgiveness is not keeping count of the times that they have failed. So when someone says, I will try to not do it again, don't just say, no, you've told me that before, I'm not going to accept it. If you forgive them, it's as if they had not done it ever before. I'll tell you a story of some close friends of mine. I called them Robert and Sharon. Robert came to my church when I was just a newcomer to that church. And so I was just basically getting acquainted with the members as they came out of the church after Sabbath, after the sermon. Robert said to me, I need to talk to you. I said, okay, well, give me your phone number, I'll give you a call. No, I don't want you to come to my home. I'll be here to meet you here. You know, it makes you nervous when you're just starting as a pastor. I'm thinking, man, what did I do already? I said, okay, why don't you meet me here on Monday at 3? And he and his wife Sharon were there on Monday to meet with me. He said to her, just wait up here, I want to talk to him first. So we went in my office, and this is a story that he told me. He said, I grew up in a split home. My dad was not an Adventist, my mom was an Adventist. And at that time, I thought that the church was a little too strict. So at the age of 18, I left home, joined the Air Force, left the church, served 2 tours of Vietnam, came back, married a lady, had a couple of kids, divorced her. Then I moved in with the lady that's outside. She's my wife. She has 2 daughters. I moved in with her, and then we have a son. I have done everything you can imagine. I have broken every commandment that is written, and probably some that should be written. And then he said to me, can God possibly forgive me? Can God possibly love me? I wasn't expecting that, and that's when you have to think quick, and sometimes thinking quick is not even the answer. I think God answered my prayer before I even had a chance to respond to or before I even had a chance to pray. And what came to mind was the story of the prodigal son. So I told them the story of the prodigal son. I told them how that after that kid had squandered everything that didn't even belong to him. That belonged to the father until the father died, but he asked for it before the father died. At that time, asking for the inheritance was the equivalent of saying, I wish you were dead. Imagine that. He said to his dad, I wish you were dead. Give me what belongs to me. And he gave him half of the inheritance, which is not even what he was entitled to, because the older brother should have inherited most of it, but he gave him half. And he threw it away. He squandered it with friends and partying and all that stuff. And he finds himself in that pit and thinking, what am I doing here? I'm Jewish. I'm touching all these unclean animals. I would be better off at my father's house as a servant. Which tells me that he wasn't really repenting. He thought, it's more convenient for me to do that. But even without that repentance, when he went back to the father to apologize, the father didn't even wait for the apology. He hugged him and rejoiced that his son had come back to life. That's the story of the prodigal son. I told Richard Robert was crying. Well, actually, he's a member of my church, and he's given me permission to mention his name, so I'm not worried about it. He was crying. Now, I want you to tell my wife. She came in and he says, tell him everything. And I thought he already told me everything. So he says to me, she says to me, your husband's left me for other women that I remember at least 13 times. And I kept thinking back. Best I could do was to say, well, listen, let's study the Bible together. And we did. Boy, I tell you, they were like sponges. Again, I was taught that a Bible study, once you finish a Bible study, leave so that they will have time to digest everything and all that. No. I had Bible studies. I said, no, you can't leave. Just do another one. Okay, so I'll do another one. No, you can't leave. So sometimes it was 3-4 hours in a row because it was never enough. They were just sucking it up there. And when it came time to baptize, His mother was living in a retirement center in Florida. She was now 90-some years old. Now, he left home when he was 18. At this time, he was 62 years old. All those years, from 18 to 62, he had wandered the world. And so I said, hey, let's do the baptism such and such a day. Are you going to tell your mom? I said, I'm not going to tell her because she'll die of a heart attack worrying before that day happens. When I'm baptized, we'll call her. I said, okay. He called his brother and he says, I'm going to be baptized next Sabbath, or I'm going to be baptized next weekend, I think is the way he said. And his brother said, where? He said, I'm going to be baptized in the Adventist church. So his brother, living in another state, and his wife came up. Their kids came up. Their kids that were living there came to the church for the baptism. We baptized and went home, enjoyed lunch. And I said, you going to call your mom? And he said, okay, let's call mom. And so he dialed mom and said, Mom, my wife and I were baptized. Again, she said, where? I said, in the Adventist church here. She said, I'm not sure I can believe you. I said, well, the pastor's here. And on the phone, hello, you're the pastor of this church? I'm the pastor. Is it true? And I said, yes, I had the joy of baptizing him this morning. And then this is what she said. I've been praying for that boy all this year. That 62-year-old boy. Been praying for that boy all this year. I'm telling you this reason, this story, and actually it responds to the question that was given to us earlier. Is it possible to accept and forgive the person who's cheated on you? She not only has forgiven him completely, their marriage is completely different. He is a pillar of that church. They have more Bible studies and more baptisms than the pastor ever does. God transformed that guy, that couple. So when you ask the question, can I ever get to the place where I forgive him for his cheating? Yes, if you understand what forgiveness is, and we'll talk to you about that in a second. When you ask the question, can I forgive myself for forgiving him or for accepting him, what have you got to forgive yourself for? You're doing what God asks you to do. Forgive. If you don't forgive others, neither will my Father will forgive you, is what Jesus said. So what have you got yourself to forgive for? You're doing what God wants you to do and what is better for your relationship. So when it comes to genuinely repenting, when someone says, when your husband says, your wife says, I will try to not do it again, accept it. Accept that. If they fail, they have to give account to God. Now, if that's not your language of apology, well, you may have to have a different one, but if that is their language of apology, accept what they have to say. And the last language of apology is when you actually request forgiveness. Will you forgive me? Now, Gary Chapman does not suggest that you use all five all at once. I'm sorry, I was wrong. What can I do to make it right? I won't do it again. Please forgive me. No, that's not what he's saying. What he's saying is discover your spouse's language of apology and use it, because that's the one they understand.
I want to say something about number 5, because number 5 is probably the one that we use the least, but I think it's one of the most important ones up there to actually say, will you forgive me? And the reason I like that is because it acknowledges the fact that forgiveness is a decision. It's not a feeling. I may not feel like forgiving you, but I can choose to forgive you. We started this morning by saying that love, true love, according to God, is a decision. It's not based on feelings that go up and down, but it is a decision that we make. And in the same way today, as we end with this topic of forgiveness, we're coming right back around to that again and seeing forgiveness is also a decision. So asking someone, will you forgive me, is acknowledging that fact that they have a decision to make.
So then we the next step. You apologize, and you have to decide whether you're going to forgive. But the truth is that all relationships need forgiveness. That's where Jesus said, and whenever you stand praying, if you hold anything against anyone, forgive them, so that your Father in heaven may forgive you your sins. Our lack of forgiveness keeps us from enjoying fully God's forgiveness. So it's not only affecting them or our relationship with them, it's also affecting our relationship with God. What happens when we fail to forgive? Well, resentment builds. Every time I think about it, it makes me mad. So therefore, who's benefiting from that? You know, someone said that when you have resentment, it's like drinking a bottle of poison and expecting the other person to die. Who's hurting who? I'm resentful. I'm the one that's hurting. Conflict increases. Hopelessness sets in. That's when we say, I don't know if we can ever fix this relationship because of what he did. I have had so many couples. You know, Pastor, my husband cheated on me 25 years ago. I don't know if I can remain married to this man. 25 years ago?
And that brings up a great bit of new research that has just come out. We just heard a researcher talk about this just a couple weeks ago. And they did some research among couples to try to find out what the number one reason for divorce was. And many of us would say, well, it's finances. You know, finances is sometimes the reason we give, the number one reason for divorce. And you hear that stated by some researchers. Others will say it's a communication, a lack of communication. Well, what she says is, in her research, she has found the number one reason that couples divorce is because of a sense of hopelessness. Hopelessness has set in. I feel we have gotten to the point in our relationship where there's no hope. And so what we need to do is establish that hope, is to help couples get a glimpse of what could be, to help them get a glimpse of how God can take the most broken marriage and restore it. And as soon as they see that light, as soon as they see a glimmer of hope, then they can go forward and work on their marriage. But it's that sense of hopelessness that sets in. Well, what's one thing that increases that hopelessness setting in? A lack of forgiveness. A lack of forgiveness and not moving forward.
Researcher Linda Waite, W-A-I-T-E, said that couples that were considering divorce but decided to stay married within 5 years, they reported having a better relationship. If they choose to stay married and to work in their marriage. It's not just to say, well, let's put up with each other for the next 5 years and see if things happen. No, we realize, okay, so we're on the verge of divorce, but let's see what we can do to make it better. Within 5 years, they report having a better relationship than ever before. So what that tells me is that some couples give up too soon on their marriage because hopelessness sets in. By the way, this is a little parenthesis. How many of you have heard that the divorce rate in America is 50%? Right. That's false. It has never been 50%. The highest it has ever been is more like 37%. That's the highest. But the average rate of divorce in America is closer to 27%. I'm telling you this because I hope you help us share this information, especially with our younger people who are coming to marriage thinking, I got 1 out of 2 chances of success in this marriage. Is that hopeful? What if instead you say to them, and by the way, and this same researcher says that couples that responded to the survey saying that they were satisfied with their relationship was more than 80%. Couples that are still married to their first spouse, over 81%. And of the remaining 19%, some of them have lost their spouse to death, not to divorce. So that hopefully we can tell our young people, look, your chances of success are upwards of 75%. That's good news. In fact, as people say, well, the rate of divorce in America is 50%, but you know what? George Barna said that the divorce rate among Christians is even higher than in the regular population. You know what? That's also false. George Barna never said that, and George Barna says, I never said it, and people keep saying that I said it, and I didn't. What I said was that those people who consider themselves Christians, but who are not involved in the church, their rate of divorce is higher. But those people who are involved, who are committed, who are engaged in the life of the church, their divorce rate is way low. Third bit of news. Wow, not only the divorce rate in America is 50%, and the divorce rate among Christians is higher, the divorce rate among Adventists is even higher than among Christians. If that's true, listen, don't marry an Adventist. Run away from Adventists. Well, what I'll say to you is sit in your church and see the reality. How many people are divorced in your church? And it is not 70% of them. Think about it. Now, we commissioned a study back in 2010. Monty Salim did it, and the divorce rate among Adventists is about the same rate as it is among Christians, which is about 25%. A little lower than among the general population. Still too high for me, but definitely not as high as some people want it to sound. When we hear that, you know, Adventist divorce is way out there, where did you get that information? And in fact, my wife and I just taught a class up at Andrews in a doctoral program for family ministry, and when I mentioned that the divorce rate in America is not 50%, immediately one of our students said, I've read that. In fact, he pulled out his iPad, showed me a book, said, look, it says here, the divorce in America is 50%. And I said, and who are they citing? Nobody. The Census Bureau says it's never been that bad. The Census Bureau of the United States of America says it's never been that bad. But you hear it so often that it becomes the truth for the land. It's not. It's not. And that is good news. Share it with all the people that you can talk about. No. Divorce rate is not that high. Your chances of success are higher than your chances of divorce. Is that good news or what? Say amen. Look at this. Forgive people in your life, even those who are not sorry for their actions. Holding on to anger only hurts you, not them. In fact, even studies that have to do with health, I mentioned one, talk about the effects of unforgiveness on health. Listen to this one.
Did you know that unforgiveness can actually make you sick? It's classified as a disease in medical books. Now, forgiveness therapy is being used to help treat diseases like cancer. Dr. Stephen Standiford, a cancer surgeon, says unforgiveness makes people sick and keeps them sick.
It's important to treat emotional wounds or disorders because they really can hinder someone's reactions to the treatments, even someone's willingness to pursue treatment.
Of all cancer patients, 61% have forgiveness issues, and of those, more than half are severe. That's according to research by Dr. Michael Berry, a pastor and the author of the book, The Forgiveness Project.
These negative emotions, this anger and hatred, creates a state of chronic anxiety. Chronic anxiety very predictably produces adrenaline and cortisol, which deplete the production of natural killer cells, which is your body's foot soldier in the fight against cancer. When a person forgives from the heart, which of course is the gold standard that we use in Matthew 18, forgiveness from the heart, we find that they're able to find a sense of peacefulness. Quite often our patients refer to that as a feeling of lightness. Lord, we don't realize what a burden anger and hatred is until we let it go.
And the first step in forgiveness therapy is recognizing forgiveness is not the same thing as condoning what a person did, which is the major hurdle for most patients.
And by the way, forgiveness does not mean that you forget either. Many people say that, well, you need to forgive and forget. If it was that easy to forget, you wouldn't even have to forgive. But you can still remember and still forgive, because forgiveness is not a feeling, it's a decision. When you forgive, you in no way change the past, but you sure do change the future. You know, we can't change the past. It happened, but you can't change the future. Here's from Proverbs chapter 10, verse 12. Hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all sin. So, what is forgiveness? Forgiveness is to give up resentment against or the desire to punish the other. You may be angry, but you give up that wish to punish them for what they did to you. Forgiveness is to give up your perceived right to punish the other person. I want to do something to make them pay for what they did to me. Forgiveness is to cancel a debt against the other. We had a professor from Virginia Commonwealth University, Everett Worthington, our meetings for Department Directors for all of North America in January, Phoenix, Arizona. And lovely guy, by the way. He's done research on forgiveness for years. He's a lovely guy. I gave all my directors a copy of his book. I had my copy, and I said to him, in fact, I love when people do that. I said to him, Dr. Worthington said, "Oh, call me F." Okay, hello, F. It's all right. F, can you sign your book for me? He said, sure. So I said, can you write to Claudio, the man who inspired me to write this book and gave me all the information contained in it? So he wrote something there. And he gave it back to me, and I opened the page to see what it written, and he wrote, to Claudio, the man who inspired me to write this book and gave me all the information. I love people with a good sense of humor. You know, he doesn't know me from Adam, who was understanding. So anyways, he's done research on forgiveness for years. He's taught on forgiveness and was tested on his doctrine or teachings on forgiveness when his mother was bludgeoned to death. A young man broke into her house Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve, I forget which one, thinking, the house is dark, there's no car in the driveway, well, she lived by herself, didn't drive, so he figures there's no one there. Crowbar broke the door of the house and went in. Then she heard a noise, came down to see what it was, and found the young man who took that same crowbar and killed her. So when the police told Dr. Worthington and his brother and sister about it, they went to his brother's house, and he says, we were there sitting in the room, and I said, I would like to have 5 minutes with that young man and a baseball bat. And as soon as he said that, he said, what am I saying? I teach about forgiveness, and here I'm thinking about killing the guy that killed my mother. So he began to experience in person what it means then to get to that point where you forgive. Forgiveness is releasing yourself, and so sometimes, or there are two types of forgiveness as far as is concerned. He says that there's something called decisional forgiveness. That's when you forgive the other, when you make the decision to forgive the other person. Deciding to forgive a personal offense and letting go of angry and resentful thoughts and feelings toward the person who has wronged you. So you make that decision. I am releasing you to God. I will no longer be the one angry with you or holding this over you. I am making the decision to forgive you. It's interesting, something that he said, just think about this for a moment. Why don't you stand for me, because I need to explain this to you. Please stand. And follow my direction. Think about some sort of offense that you have, that someone has done to you, your spouse, a co-worker, a relative, or whatever, and capture that offense in your hands. Just put that there in your hands and hold your hands up there, and right in front of your chest, arms straight out, and hold it there. Don't move until I tell you. Because that that you're holding
Don't bend your
there,
elbows, straight out.
that you're holding there is what whoever did to you and hurt you to the point where every night you think about it, you dream about it, you wonder how to repay them for the thing that they did. Keep your arms up. That's what they did to you, and you're holding on to that. It's bugging you and continues to disturb you all the time. How's that feeling so far, by the way?
Rabbit
And the
arm.
longer you hold on to it, the longer that it embarrasses you because it's making you feel horrible until finally you let go. How does that feel? That's what God wants us to experience. Why are you holding on to something that's causing you difficulty? Here's an example. Some people will do this, hold on to their bitterness and to their anger, or some people will actually forgive before they're ready, before they even understand. We talked about the 5 languages of apology. Here's a clip from a show that is no longer on TV. I'll just explain to you what happened. Apparently, this couple, he saw his wife get out of a taxi cab with some other guy, and immediately thought that they were having an affair. But he kept it all inside and was being bugged by that. But then they went to a wedding party, and they got into an argument, and so when they realized everybody was looking at them, they went into a separate room, and this is the dialogue that they had. I don't care what happened, I just forgive you without understanding what happened. Then it's not really forgiveness either. That's why decisional forgiveness is very important, because even though you know what happened and it hurts you, you make the decision to forgive them. That's decisional forgiveness. But then there's the other type, and it's what he calls emotional forgiveness. That's when you actually feel that emotional release. Now it's not just making a decision, but I really don't have any angry feelings. I don't have any negativity. I don't have any animosity anymore. I have been released. See, by releasing the other, I myself have been released emotionally. Don't confuse those two. Emotional forgiveness is replacing the negative emotions with positive feelings like compassion, sympathy, or even empathy. So forgiveness is more like a journey, and these are some of the steps that you can take. Number 1, set aside a time to discuss the issue one-on-one. And don't talk about everything that's happened the last 25 years that we've been married. One thing, just one thing. Let's talk about that one thing.
Number 2, identify the harmful problem or the event. In other words, what specifically are we talking about? We have to know what it is, and we have to be willing to identify it, to put it on the table, and there again, just like number 1 says, one issue, one event. We're not going to bring out a laundry list, but we're going to set aside time to do it. We're going to talk about one issue.
Number 3, fully explore the pain and concern. What is it that is causing you that pain? Because again, it's not enough to say, okay, well, forgive me. I know what happened. But, what is it about my actions, my words, my attitude, whatever it was that caused you the pain? And what kind of pain are you feeling?
Number 4, ask for forgiveness. And this was one of the languages where you actually use the words, I'm acknowledging that what I did hurt you. Will you forgive me? I'm asking you to forgive me.
Number 5, agree to forgive. So now your spouse has apologized to you, then you can agree to forgive, whether it's decisional, you make the decision to forgive, or it's emotional, where you actually feel the emotion being washed, the negative emotion being washed away. And number 6, commit to refrain from doing the thing that caused the offense, which was again the 4th language of apology, when you say, I won't do it again. Now keep in mind that some forgiveness may take some time, depending on the issue. If it was just a small thing, it may not take much, but if it's a bigger thing, don't expect that forgiveness will take place overnight. Dr. Worthington uses this acronym, REACH, And by which it says of our recall, remember the hurt that was caused by you as objectively as possible, which is again that, sit down and talk about the one issue. E for empathize, try to understand the viewpoint of the person that wronged you. For A, altruism, that says, but think about a time you hurt someone and were forgiven. Then offering the gift of forgiveness to the person who hurt you. It's interesting how that we are appreciative when we are the ones who receive forgiveness, but boy, when it comes to forgiving others, that's hard. We don't want to do it. C is for committing, publicly forgiving the person who wronged you, and the H for hold on, not forgetting the hurt, but reminding yourself that you made the choice to forgive. You want to take a picture of that screen? I'll let you take a picture of that screen, so then we will move on to the next.
Well, they are. I'll talk about something else. We were recently in Netherlands, and when we were there, I told my husband, I said, "There's one thing I want to do here. So often we go to different places in the world, or different places we go in and we speak and we leave, we get on a plane, and we don't have the opportunity to visit places." But I had my eye on a place in the Netherlands that I wanted to visit, and that was the home of Corrie ten Boom. If you've ever read her story, The Hiding Place, it's an incredible story about forgiveness, what we're talking about. And I wanted to go visit her home, and so we did. And as I visited her home and climbed the steps up to the hiding place and sat in that tiny little closet, and the door came down, the hiding place, and I thought how many people were crammed in to that tiny space for all those days, praying for their lives. And then I thought of Corrie ten Boom, and we've also been in the concentration camps. We also went to Dachau, concentration camp there, and I thought of how Corrie ten Boom lost all of her family members. And she tells a story in that book about the day that she came face to face with the prison guard. She recognized him. She recognized that this was the guard responsible for murdering and executing her family members. And she said at that point, she was just struck that she needed to forgive. And she says this line in her book that has always stuck with me. She said, at that point, I realized this. There is no pit so deep, but that God's love does not go deeper still. And I love that, and I love how it also relates to our families and marriages. And the question we got today on infidelity, and if your husband or your wife has had an extramarital affair, is that the unpardonable sin? Can I still have a marriage? Can I still have a fulfilling marriage after an affair? And we're here to tell you, yes, you can. We have stood witness to it in so many couples and in so many places. And just remember what Corrie ten Boom said. There really is no pit so deep, but that God's love does not go deeper still.
Look at this words. In fact, one comes from her. Forgiveness is the key that unlocks the door of resentment and the handcuffs of hatred. Or Max Lucado also said it a different way. Forgiveness is unlocking the door to set someone free and realizing you were the prisoner. So who does forgiveness benefit? You first. And then whoever you have angry feelings with. So as we close, we want to share with you a thought that we read some time ago. And I'm going to highlight some of the words that come from that quote. Comes out of The Faith I Live by Ellen White, where she says, "Though difficulties, perplexities, and discouragement may arise, let neither husband nor wife harbor the thought that their union is a mistake or a disappointment. Determined," see, that's a decision. We determine to be all that it is possible to be for each other. Continue the early attention, that's making those deposits. In every way, encourage each other in fighting the battles of life. Study to advance the happiness of the other. Again, learning about each other's needs and how you meet them. Let there be mutual love, mutual forbearance. And then marriage, instead of being the end of love, will be, as it were, the very beginning of love. Maybe we should also hear those words, and you can take a picture quickly, or not. It's The Faith I Live By, page 253. Listen to this word, because sometimes we forget or don't want to think about it. Learn to appreciate what you have before time makes you appreciate what you have. Learn to appreciate what you have before time makes you appreciate what you have. So let me tell you about a fellow by the name of Robertson McClokin. He was president of the Columbia Bible College and Seminary, a well-known Christian leader. His wife, too, was very well-known, Muriel. She had been a theology teacher at the seminary. She had a radio program that was heard all over the United States, loved by many. One time, while Muriel was on her program, they noticed that she would begin to say something, and then in mid-sentence she would just stop, like she was lost. She didn't know where to go. Or she would go in a totally different direction from a